people loved it. It was just those nasty internet trolls with their hatred and their bigotry and their patriarchy that made everyone think it was bad. Or Star Wars fans were just too toxic to handle a pair of strong, diverse women leading the way. Ha! Gay! I think probably the most hilarious moment in all of this was the online petition to renew the show that didn't even make it to 100,000 signatures. And I'm pretty sure most of them were from content creators who wanted to pay for a new extension on their house. But the Acolyte Copium Brigade have finally been given a lifeline in the shape of this article from Forbes, boldly informing us that The Acolyte was actually the second most viewed show on Disney Plus last year, with a whopping 2.7 billion minutes watched.
No way!
Ha! Take that, toxic fanboys. That right there is the power of many. The Acolyte was a huge hit, and there's nothing you can do about it. In fact, I'm sure it's going to be renewed before you know it. Just you wait. But seriously though, 2.7 billion minutes watched? I mean, that sounds pretty impressive, right?
Wrong.
Well, not really when you start to break it down a little. In reality, it's a bit like saying that a lot of people learned how to swim because of the Titanic. Yeah, it's technically true, but it misses out some pretty important information for context. For example, The Acolyte ran for 8 episodes with a total runtime of 329 minutes. I mean, it felt more like 2,000 minutes, but let's stick to the raw numbers here. So if you divide 2.7 billion watch minutes by the 329 minute length of the show, that converts into just over 8.2 million views for the whole season. Jesus, I get more than that in like a couple of weeks on my channel, and my content doesn't cost $230 million to produce. Just as a little side note, by the way, and I still can't believe this is true, but according to my math, The Acolyte cost almost $700,000 per minute. I mean, just how? Who was writing the check for this? And why did they think it was a good idea? But okay, fine, if that's the metric that you have to use, how does it compare to other shows? Well, let's take something big like Squid Game Season 2, for example, on Netflix. That only came out around Christmas time and it's already at 72 billion minutes watched. That is 26 times more popular than The Acolyte, and with an $84 million budget, it cost 3 times less to make.
Really?
But you know, maybe I'm being unfair trying to compare Sydney Sweeney's and Rachel Zegler's here. Let's look at some other Disney Plus Star Wars shows for a more appropriate comparison. Well, Season 3 of The Mandalorian came in at a comparatively whopping 6.4 billion minutes watched, which is still like 10 times less than Squid Game, but let's not get hung up on that. Book of Boba Fett also came in at over 6 billion minutes, which is more than twice as much as The Acolyte, although fuck knows how because that show was a disaster. Andor looks superficially impressive with over 4 billion views, but that show had like 12 episodes and they were really fucking long, so in the interests of fairness I'm not going to count that here. But even Ahsoka, with just 8 episodes, managed to pull in roughly the same amount with over 4 billion minutes watched. That's about 1.4 billion minutes more than The Acolyte. I could run these kinds of comparisons all day, but every single time it's going to bring us to the same conclusion. The Acolyte wasn't a success by any metric that you care to use. It wasn't a success compared to other streaming shows, and it wasn't even a success compared to other Star Wars shows. The fact that it came second place on Disney Plus last year doesn't prove how popular it was, it proves how unpopular Disney Plus actually is, spending absurd amounts of money on shows that nobody wants to see, desperately trying to milk IPs that dried up years ago. The Acolyte truly was the smartest kid on the short bus, and as it turns out, the Disney Plus bus was particularly short last year. And therein lies the rub, dear viewer. The Acolyte wasn't cancelled because of minutes watched, or budget relative to viewership, or any of those boring business terms that Disney Lucasfilm apparently doesn't give a shit about. It was cancelled because it was a complete and utter laughingstock. It had become a meme, a lolcow in TV form, mocked and derided by almost everyone, to the point where it was actively harming the Star Wars brands. Or what was left of it anyway. I have seen so many comments from disenchanted Star Wars fans who finally had enough and checked out of the IP forever after The Acolyte. For a lot of people, it really was the straw that broke the camel's back, and I'm willing to bet that it was at least partly responsible for the failure of Skeleton Crew, a Star Wars show that was actually halfway decent and probably would have attracted a decent fan base if it had come out just a few years earlier. But it didn't, and so it couldn't. So no, The Acolyte wasn't some misunderstood sleeper hit with a groundswell of fan support keeping it alive. It was an absolute, total and complete disaster. Worse, it was an expensive disaster that harmed the brand it was supposed to be building. Now don't get me wrong, it was definitely fun to point and laugh at, and the anarchist in me actually kinda hopes that it does get a season 2, because truly, the mind boggles at just how much further this show could drag Star Wars down. But something tells me we're never gonna find out.
Bicara soal mempersulit hidup, TikTok adalah sumber inspirasi.
Kita mah realistis ya, di atas 1M gak sih?
Standar hidup atau lifestyle yang terbilang tidak realistis adalah makanan sehari-hari. Tidak lengkap rasanya berbicara TikTok tanpa membicarakan tren yang tidak masuk akal. Ironisnya, banyak yang menggunakan TikTok sebagai acuan dalam hidup dan hubungan dengan manusia. Mungkin ada kaitannya dengan kesan bahwa banyak orang bodoh yang main TikTok. Agak kasar, tapi banyak yang bilang begitu. Bahkan TikTok dibilang sebagai aplikasi kandang monyet. Kita akan membahas itu mulai dari standar hidup ala TikTok yang tidak masuk akal, hingga alasan banyak orang memegang tren TikTok sebagai prinsip hidup. Salah satu tren yang sangat populer di TikTok adalah pembahasan soal love language atau bahasa cinta. Banyak video yang mengajak kita untuk mengenali bahasa cinta dari pasangan kita. Entah itu physical touch, act of service, quality time, dan sebagainya. Ini bukanlah hal buruk. Memahami cara pasangan kita mengungkapkan cinta memang penting. Tapi yang jadi masalah adalah ketika love language ini dijadikan acuan absolut yang menimbulkan ekspektasi berlebihan. Di TikTok, sering kita melihat orang yang merasa bahwa pasangannya tidak mencintai mereka karena tidak memberikan bentuk cinta sesuai ekspektasi mereka. Standar semacam ini sangat bisa jadi merusak. Banyak pengguna TikTok, terutama anak muda yang menyerap informasi ini tanpa filter. Mereka mulai berpikir, kalau pacarku nggak kasih hadiah atau nggak ngajak jalan ke tempat tertentu, berarti dia nggak cinta. Ini berbahaya karena love language yang dijadikan standar absolut malah membuat orang lupa bahwa setiap hubungan itu unik. Tidak semua orang punya kapasitas finansial atau emosional untuk memenuhi harapan ideal ala TikTok, dan itu bukan berarti mereka tidak mencintai kita. Menurut Gary Chapman, penulis buku The 5 Love Languages, konsep ini dimaksudkan untuk membantu pasangan memahami satu sama lain, bukan untuk menimbulkan ekspektasi tidak realistis yang pada akhirnya malah membebani hubungan. Namun, TikTok cenderung mereduksi konsep ini jadi formula sederhana dan kaku, membuat cinta terasa seperti kontrak sosial yang mengharuskan kita memberikan tanda-tanda cinta yang spesifik atau hubungan tersebut dianggap gagal. Jika kita perhatikan lebih detail, love language yang paling diidam-idamkan kaum hawa adalah act of service. Seakan love language ini adalah yang paling utama dan tertinggi dibanding dengan yang lainnya. Padahal semua love language memiliki strata yang sama. Ada yang lebih ngeri lagi, bahwa physical touch selalu dikaitkan dengan sentuhan yang erat kaitannya dengan aktivitas seksual. Berbicara tentang standar yang tidak realistis tidak lengkap tanpa membahas soal typing ganteng. Ini tren yang seakan mengklasifikasi pria berdasarkan cara mereka mengetik. Misalnya, cowok yang pakai tanda baca dan gak salah ketik itu termasuk ganteng. Atau cowok yang ngetiknya rapi langsung auto crush. Tren semacam ini terlihat sepele, tetapi jika dilihat lebih detail, kita bisa melihat bagaimana ini mempengaruhi pandangan orang terhadap citra personal orang lain. Mengetik dengan rapi memanglah penting, dan termasuk basic skill, terutama bagi yang berkecimpung di dunia pendidikan. Namun dalam komunikasi, yang penting adalah pesan tersampaikan dengan baik. TikTok mengarahkan kita untuk percaya bahwa pria ideal adalah mereka yang terlihat sempurna. Tidak hanya dalam penampilan fisik, tetapi juga dalam hal-hal kecil seperti gaya mengetik atau cara berbicara. Ini adalah bagian dari penguatan budaya perfeksionisme yang mengakar di media sosial. Setiap gerakan kecil, bahkan cara mengetik, dianggap sebagai penentu daya tarik seseorang. Akhirnya, kita terjebak dalam obsesi untuk tampil sempurna di depan orang lain. Meskipun itu berarti harus berpura-pura. Banyak ahli sudah membahas dampak buruk media sosial terhadap kesehatan mental, terutama pada anak muda. Sebuah studi dari Royal Society for Public Health di Inggris mengungkapkan bahwa platform seperti Instagram dan sekarang TikTok dapat memperburuk masalah citra tubuh dan menimbulkan rasa cemas serta depresi. Ketika standar ganteng bahkan merambah ke hal-hal kecil seperti gaya mengetik, kita semakin kehilangan pemahaman bahwa yang terpenting dalam sebuah hubungan adalah kedalaman karakter, bukan sekedar hal sepele seperti mengetik. Selain love language,
NFL players have a way of riling people up like no other athletes. One minute they're breaking records and doing the impossible. The next, they're dividing the country. Take Antonio Brown, whose jaw-dropping talent was matched perfectly with his off-field chaos. Or Patrick Mahomes, who some claim has the refs in his back pocket. But on the flip side, you've got icons like Peyton Manning, whose charm and legendary career make him a universally loved figure. Or Joe Burrow, the underdog quarterback who's as swaggy as he is unstoppable. So who are the biggest villains and heroes in the NFL? What makes them so celebrated? What makes them so hated? And how did their actions on and off the field cement their place in the history books? Let's break it all down. Undeniably one of the most electrifying players in the NFL, with speed that can leave defenders in the dust. There's a reason they call him Cheetah. His playmaking ability is different, and when the ball is in his hands, it feels like anything can happen. But while Hill has mostly been the hero on the field, his off-field issues have gathered a lot of attention. Statistically, Hill has been great. He has over 10,000 career receiving yards and has caught 70-plus touchdowns. Whether it's a quick slant turned into a 50-yard dash or a perfectly placed deep ball that he tracks down like a blur, Hill has consistently been one of the top producers in the league and was a key part in Kansas City's 2020 Super Bowl win. But for all the accolades, it's impossible not to think about his off-field drama. Early in his career, Hill's personal life made headlines for all the wrong reasons. In 2014, while still in college, he was arrested for assaulting his then-girlfriend, an incident that led to his conviction for domestic violence. But things started to turn around for Hill, and he seemed like a changed man until 2020. After a heated dispute with his former teammate quarterback Patrick Mahomes, Hill made it clear he wasn't happy in Kansas City, publicly criticizing the team and indicating that he wanted out. His request to leave Kansas City culminated in a blockbuster trade to the Miami Dolphins in 2022. The Dolphins gave Hill a massive contract, and the Chiefs received multiple draft picks in return. They also ended up winning 2 more Super Bowls as soon as he left, proving Hill wasn't as necessary to the team as he had thought. But even after his move to Miami, the drama didn't stop. This past year, he had a couple incidents. To start the season, he was pulled over for careless driving on his way to a game, which quickly escalated when Hill didn't seem to comply with the officer's orders, as was shown on the body cam footage. This soon became a national controversy and also worsened Hill's lingering wrist injury when he was pushed to the ground by the cops. Hill was shortly released and did play that game against the Jags, where he had an 80-yard touchdown. Soon after, he basically became a meme for the amount of children he's had. Between 2023 and 2024, there have been reports that he had 7 children with multiple women. But to make it even crazier, he's been married to his wife the entire time. He just didn't seem to care. He's had more newborns than his 6 touchdowns in the 2024 season, and to make matters worse for the Dolphins, it looks like he wants to leave the team now. He even changed his Instagram profile picture to Antonio Brown doing the peace sign when he quit the Bucs and essentially retired from football forever. The question is, where will Tyreek Hill end up? And what is in store for his future? Speaking of that Instagram profile, let's talk about Antonio Brown. When it came to pure talent, AB was elite. A former 6th-round draft pick, he quickly became one of the most electrifying wide receivers in the NFL. Over a career that spanned over a decade, he earned 7 Pro Bowl selections, 4 All-Pro honors, and led the league in receptions and receiving yards multiple times. In his prime, AB was a superstar. Playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers, he formed one of the league's most lethal duos with quarterback Ben Roethlisberger, leading to consistently high yardage and touchdown totals. In 2015, he posted over 1,800 receiving yards. For years, he was considered not just one of the best wide receivers, but arguably the most complete player at his position in the league. In fact, many people saw him surpassing Jerry Rice as the future GOAT wide receiver. But all of that changed dramatically. Despite all his success on the field, AB's career quickly became defined by chaos. The first major sign of trouble materialized in 2019 when AB forced his way out of Pittsburgh.